Joining us on the line now from Greece is Patrick Brigham to talk about his first book. It's called Herodotus, the Gnome of Sofia. Welcome to the book show, Patrick.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you with us. So Greece, I have to ask you first of all, what took you to Greece? Whereabouts are you?
Well, I'd spent some time in Bulgaria, and Greece is next door to Bulgaria, and when it got to that point where I had to decide where I'd like to live a bit more, permanently, Greece was a lot more attractive.
You spent quite a while in Bulgaria, didn't you?
Well, I first went there in 1993 to live. I'd been there before the changes. I first went there in 1985.
Well, you must have seen a lot of changes over the years there.
Well, it's an awful lot of changes. Although sometimes I look back and I realise that, particularly with certain people's mentality, that hasn't changed, over dramatically. But it looks different,
Yeah.
It's a little bit like Spain was during the time of Franco.
Right.
That's a very good analogy.
Yeah. And what took you there before that? Because the sort of boom, if you like, the tourist boom and the real estate boom, I guess, was only within the last sort of 10 years. But you were there before that. So why were you there?
I went there because I had an opportunity to do some real estate, believe it or not, because I am a surveyor and valuer, as well as all these other wonderful things.
Okay.
And I was going to open an office of a certain firm of West End commercial estate agents and valuers, but they pulled out because the truth was that not very much was happening there. It was an awful lot of hype and a great deal of, public relations in action, but nothing else really.
And you had an important position when you were there. You were the editor-in-chief of the first English-language news magazine in Bulgaria. Correct. Between 95 and 2000. What was that like then, doing that?
Well, I did it because there wasn't much else to do. And I thought to myself, well, I can't sit here and do nothing. There's very little happening on the property scene. I'd more or less completed all the big deals that could be done. And I thought, well, what can I do the best? Well, I like writing, and I started a magazine, found quite a number of local writers of one sort or another, some English, some Bulgarians, and before you know what had happened, we had a magazine, the Sofia Western News.
And was it well received in Bulgaria?
I think there's a kind of indifference towards foreigners in general at that time. So it was mainly for the foreigners to read. They didn't have, newspapers in different languages. So this was more or less the only way at the time that they could find out what was happening. The idea was to give them a taste of the politics, the business, whatever it might be, the culture, the music, even the football.
So did you obviously learn an awful lot about Bulgaria and the politics and the culture when you were there?
I think the thing about these ex-communist countries is that the ex-communists take a lot longer to go than you might imagine. And so one of the lessons that you learned was that it hadn't changed overnight, and that it was a good idea to try and understand the mentality and how they thought about themselves. In Herodotus, the Gnome of Sofia, there are bits in there which seriously talk about the mentality of communists and disenfranchised communists. This is sort of interspersed with all the funny bits. Every so often you come across a serious bit which is, I think, fairly revealing.
Yeah. So why did you decide for your first book that you wanted to write about this particular subject?
Well, I think that I always liked Please Minister or Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister on the telly. I don't know whether you remember that.
I didn't watch them, but I do remember the titles,
okay. Paul Eddington and so on. and it was written by Peter Jay. He's still writing, and I think there's a new series coming out on telly.
Oh, really?
And the thing is that I wondered, in fact, who it was that the British hadn't actually laughed at. You know, they'd laughed at politicians and they'd laughed at all sorts of people, but had they laughed at diplomats? And the next thing that inspired me was a remark made by Gordon Brown in Parliament, and at the time he was a bit disgruntled about something, and he said, as far as he could see, the majority of British embassies could be replaced by in a room in a three-star hotel and a laptop. God. And I thought, well, you know, that's quite serious.
Yes.
And it really sort of went from there.
So your main character in the book is Sir Arthur Cumberpot.
It is a rather unusual
I like the name. So tell us a bit about him.
Well, he's sort of an invention, really. I mean, he's a man who wants to be in a particular position in society. And he's done just about everything he can to... I suppose the word would be to improve himself or to change himself. You know, he's developed an extraordinarily plummy accent, and of course he's married this rather large lady who it turns out to be the daughter of a well-known or infamous British spy.
Ah.
But he is, generally speaking, a harmless character. He's more sinned against than sinning. And so is she, in a way, because she hasn't done anything wrong. It's just that everybody has decided that she has. And so she's become a victim of some kind of, mechanism which has simply turned her into this dreadful person, but she's not really.
And is that because of people finding out about what her father did?
It's partly that. It's partly that, because she is not a very nice, she's not a very pleasant person. And so I think people are looking for opportunities to not like her, really.
Right.
She's having a bit of fun with the owner of the local horse stables when she's not accompanying her husband.
Right.
She's having a bit of fun, a bit of slap and tickle. And it doesn't seem to worry her too much, because she's rather sort of... how can I put it? You know, rather self-important and and a bit of a hypocrite.
So, as a reader reading the story, are we supposed to like Arthur but not Annabelle so much?
Well, I don't know that you're going to like either of them, but you might feel sorry for him.
Okay.
And in the end, he doesn't get bumped off. His wife gets bumped off. In the end, he spends the rest of his days in Greece, in Alexandroupoli, living with his PA, who he's had for years and years and years, who has adored him from a distance for many years.
Yeah.
Finally, she can do something to help him and to make him feel better about himself.
So who do you think you wrote the book for? What kind of people do you believe would enjoy the story?
Well, unfortunately, I do. That's the worst part about it. I think the main thing is it is a story. It is interesting from the point of view it tells you about a certain time in history in Eastern Europe. But I think that if I were to pinpoint anybody, I'd probably say someone who liked P.G. Wodehouse. Or John Le Carrier. If you can put those two together, it's quite difficult.
Yeah.
And also Tom Sharp.
Okay. Yep. So, and men and women alike?
I think so. Yes. I mean, I think that I'm looking at Middle England, really, to be honest with you. But there's lots of Middle England in Spain, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think this is something for people who may have been through that point. I don't think young people are really terribly interested in, communism or Nazism. You know, it's something which they've heard about at school, but it doesn't seem to affect them. I think with some people, they might have experienced this, and they can see in the text some little truths coming through. But one mustn't forget that it's supposed to be funny, because the main character is a gnome.
Of course, I wouldn't have expected anything different.
But he's not an ordinary one. He's full of all sorts of electronic gadgetry. And because the Cold War is over, that's what MI6 thinks, and it's time to go technical. And so instead of having secret drops and all the usual paraphernalia that we used to read about in John le Carrier, now they can use their mobile phone to download their information to Herodotus, the gnome of Sofia.
So why did you decide to make him a gnome?
Well, because I don't think I'm talking out of turn, I hope not. There were, in Moscow, just outside the British Embassy there, a few years ago, there was a rock. And actually, that's exactly what it was. It was a kind of telephone device. It's called a WiMAX. I was in the telephone business for a number of years as well. And so, it's rather like when you go into a supermarket or go onto the tube in London, you can use your telephone. And it's because it's got a mini GSM station.
Ah, clever.
So instead of all that nonsense about leaving chalk marks and, meeting people outside Marylebone Station, they just go past and go click. And it's all done.
Fantastic.
The thing is that, of course, they're looking for a bona fide reason for having all these people around. So what they do is they have a party. It's called the Queen's Birthday Party. And they hand out a great number of gnomes to various people as sort of presents from, or as winnings from the raffle. And the idea is that they go to a monthly meeting, and so you've got some people who have just got a gnome, and then there are others who've just got a gnome and they've got a special telephone. And of course they can download all their sort of wicked secret messages.
Fantastic. It sounds like a great story. Very complex as well, but in a good way.
Well, yeah, I think it keeps you occupied. It's I don't know how anybody would explain it. Probably there's something in it for everybody.
Yes, I can see that, definitely. Patrick, it's been great to have you with us on the book show. Thanks ever so much for joining us.
Jolly good.
If listeners want to find out more about you and the book, they can have a look on your website. It's patrickbrigham.co.uk, and they can get a copy of your book. It's called Herodotus, the Gnome of Sofia. Thank you very much, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Hannah.